In order to understand what someone means when they call themselves an atheist, we need to know what about God they do not believe. Against what theism are they opposed? Now, the term atheist comes from a Greek theos, meaning without gods, which was derogatorily applied to anyone thought to not believe in the accepted gods of the culture. So this included those who believed in false gods, no gods, or simply doctrines that stood in conflict with established religions. So in fact, early Christians were considered atheists, as they boldly proclaimed that God was one. They stood in opposition to the polytheism of their time. So in a sense, if we believe that the majority of Americans or the majority of Oklahomans believe in a fundamentalist Christian God, then rejecting that God would make everyone in this church likely fit into the category of atheist, if we mean not believing in that particular God. So that doesn't help us understand what we do, in fact, believe about God, or at least about what is at the center of our lives. Now, as mentioned in the reading that Marlon read earlier, there are many different versions of atheism. There's this broad denial that there's any creator or manager of the universe. There's another conviction that even if there's a creator, manager of the world, she does not reward the good and punish the wicked. There's existential atheism, as he said, the assertion that even if there is a God, he does not intervene in our lives. There's an agnostic atheism, the cautious denial that claims that God's existence can be neither proved nor disproved. And another cautious denial version of atheism, which claims that the word God is so confusing it's in fact meaningless. And then finally, there's this pragmatic atheism, as described in Epstein's book, which regards God as irrelevant to ethical and successful living and views all discussions about God as a waste of time. Now, ironically, I don't find pragmatic atheism to be very pragmatic. I mean, if you're in the least bit interested in getting to know or understanding your fellow man or woman, that makes it very complicated if we just assume that the conversation itself is a waste of time. Now, there's an abundance of literature out currently that argues for this new atheism beyond all of the previous versions that I've just described. And it's taken shape through people like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens. And even though they're getting an enormous amount of attention, I must say that I have not been very moved. I would agree with Karen Armstrong, who argues in her newest book, The Case for God, that this new atheist's analysis is disappointingly shallow because it's based on poor theology. Religion, she says, was never supposed to provide answers to questions that lay within the reach of human reason. Religion's task, she says, is closely allied to that of art. It's to help us to live creatively, peacefully, and even joyously with realities for which there were no easy explanations and problems we could not solve. Morality, pain, grief, despair, and outrage at the injustice and cruelty of life. Religion, says Karen Armstrong, is a practical discipline. Just like the fundamentalists whom they argue against, Armstrong claims that the new atheists believe that they alone are in possession of the truth. They read Scripture in an entirely literal manner and seem to never have heard of the long tradition of allegoric interpretation or of higher criticism. Thus, she concludes, Dawkins is not correct to assume that fundamentalist belief either represents or is even typical of either Christianity or religion as a whole. And he is also wrong to claim that God is a scientific hypothesis that is a conceptual framework for bringing intelligibility to a series of experiments and observations. So, you can call me an atheist too. if it means that I don't believe in a fundamentalist Christian God, if it means I don't believe in that God brings solutions to scientific problems. You can call me an atheist if it doesn't mean I don't believe in a hateful, if it means I don't believe in a hateful, disdainful, meddling God who grants favors. If it means I don't believe in a God who causes natural disasters and plays favorites. You can call me an atheist too if it means I don't believe in a God that will only bless those who say certain words, or pray certain prayers, or read certain books. But we need to be in dialogue for you to know what I mean by atheist. And the label of atheist may in fact not help you get there. I might be called an atheist, but that doesn't mean that I can't follow the example of Jesus, or use theist language, or pray to an all-loving, comforting source within and among us that I have experienced. Although I must admit, sometimes I catch myself behaving as though I believed in a punishing, wrathful God. Do you know what I mean by that? You know that God with his finger, and I mean his, on the smite button? Just waiting for an excuse to push it. I have to stay on my toes not to fall in this trap, you see, because it was ingrained in me very, very young. Not just through the churches of my youth, but through the culture. And I no longer prescribe to that atheism, to that theism. Now, I know professed atheists, die-hard atheists, who behave as though they have a smite button God waiting to rob them of any success that they've had too. You see, our behavior shows what we believe sometimes before we can even articulate it. But the good news is that we have the power to change both what we believe and how we behave. We don't have to stick with what was first presented to us by chance. The conversation that will help us understand ourselves and one another is not, are you a theist or are you an atheist? The value of the conversation does not come from these categories. The value of the conversation comes from describing what we think about God, about humanity, about what we value in the world. We can learn a lot in a conversation that describes what we think about God. For when we learn about what is at the center of our lives, what's important to someone else, how they spend their time and their energy, what values they hold, then we are truly learning about their religion, about what they're bound to.